Do you think fatigue, brain fog, or even constant cold hands are just normal signs of aging? For seniors, those could actually be red flags of hypotension or low blood pressure that can sneak up silently. The tricky part, many of these 10 warning signs are so ordinary they get brushed off. But ignoring them can increase your risk of falls, kidney problems, even hospitalization. Stay with me, because I'll unpack the subtle ways your body is waving the red flag and how you can stop dismissing them as just another part of getting old. What low blood pressure really means for seniors. Most people understand why having high blood pressure is a major health threat. It puts excess strain on the heart, wears out the arteries, and can push someone toward a heart attack or stroke. But here's the question almost nobody thinks to ask. Why is low blood pressure just as risky, maybe even more so, especially for older adults? It seems backwards. We're told for years to keep that number down. Doctors cheer when our readings drop. Magazines run headlines praising lower is better. But the truth is, there's a tipping point. When pressure dips below what the body needs to circulate blood effectively, organs begin to starve for oxygen in silence. And in seniors, that silent damage doesn't just add risk, it accelerates decline. To put numbers behind it, the latest 2025 medical surveys show a striking jump in cases. A decade ago, fewer than 1 in 10 seniors carried a diagnosis of chronic hypotension. Now, that number has more than doubled. In nursing facilities, the rates are even higher, with nearly a quarter of residents recording low blood pressure readings that persist over time. A condition once seen as uncommon is now regularly noted on charts, yet still often brushed off as nothing serious. That's a dangerous gap because unlike hypertension, which gets front-page attention and aggressive treatment, hypotension slips into the background, hardly discussed until a crisis forces recognition. Consider the story of Arthur, a 74-year-old grandfather who loved working in his yard. He felt dizzy every so often when he stood up, but he laughed it off, assuming it was part of getting older. One afternoon, he rose too quickly from his favorite recliner, stumbled, fell against the table, and ended up in the hospital with a fractured hip. Doctors later traced the accident to an untreated drop in blood pressure. The fall was preventable. His symptoms weren't new, but because nobody had told him these harmless spells were warning signs, Arthur went from enjoying his weekend routine to months of painful recovery and reduced independence. For seniors, this is the hidden danger. What looks minor at first glance can snowball rapidly. Here's what's really going on in the body when pressure is too low. Blood pressure is the force that keeps oxygen and nutrients moving through arteries to each organ. Think of it as the body's delivery system. When levels fall under the threshold of stability, circulation to the brain is immediately compromised. Cells that need a near constant supply of oxygen are forced to run short. The heart itself also relies on steady arterial filling. Without it, pumping strength suffers further. Kidneys, which act like careful filters, depend on that force to clear toxins. Cut down the pressure long enough, and every system ends up working with a deficit. Older adults carry special vulnerabilities. Medications commonly prescribed for conditions such as heart disease, Parkinson's, or depression can all unintentionally lower blood pressure numbers. Combine that with an aging heart muscle that no longer pumps with the same force, and arteries that have stiffened and lost elasticity. And the result is a circulation system not as responsive as it used to be. So when a sudden change in posture, a big meal, or an overhot day arrives, the system buckles more easily. Seniors may pass out while walking to the bathroom or become dangerously disoriented during everyday activities. Another misunderstanding keeps the danger hidden. Many people believe that any low reading automatically signals great health. After all, athletes often run lower pressures and enjoy a reduced risk of heart disease. But the situation is entirely different for seniors who don't have the same cardiac reserve or vascular resilience. In other words, a number like 160 might be perfectly fine for a marathon runner, but for an 80-year-old taking heart medication, it could mean fainting during a shower or struggling with enough brain perfusion for balance. One patient's ideal reading can become another's hospitalization risk. Society also reinforces the mistake. Seniors are constantly praised when their readings drop below 120. Doctors congratulate them. Caregivers breathe easier. Family members assume the medications must be doing wonders. With hypertension so heavily emphasized in public health campaigns, even a borderline or abnormally low value can be mistaken as commendable. That misplaced encouragement ensures many older adults remain unaware of the threat until side effects appear in frightening ways. It's the one test where everyone's trying to get a lower score. As one doctor dryly joked, but too low, and it's game over. The bottom line becomes clear. Low pressure isn't always safe pressure. Seniors, in particular, are not insulated from the consequences. On the contrary, their circulation systems are fragile enough that hypotension magnifies the very problems supposedly being avoided with treatment. The dizziness, confusion, fatigue, and other signals aren't just quirks of retirement life. They are the body's alarms begging for correction before something worse happens. So the question turns practical. If low pressure carries these risks, how can someone recognize it before accidents or organ stress pile up? What early signs point to trouble when the body stays quiet most of the time? This is where subtle clues matter more than most people realize. Seniors often confuse them with ordinary aging, but each one reveals a pressure problem that deserves attention. Understanding and spotting these signals early is the first step toward protecting independence, mobility, and health. Now, let's break down the 10 red flags most people dismiss, but never should. The silent drop, sudden dizziness, and vertigo. Why does feeling woozy when you stand up matter so much more than being dehydrated on a hot day? Most people assume dizziness is temporary and harmless, but in reality, that sudden rush of lightheadedness is often a sign of orthostatic hypotension. This condition happens when blood pressure drops quickly as you shift from lying or sitting to standing. The force that normally pushes blood upward to your brain weakens in those first critical seconds, and the result is instability. For older adults, those few seconds can mean the difference between walking safely across the room or crashing to the ground. It may sound like a minor inconvenience, but research shows it's one of the most overlooked symptoms of low blood pressure, with very real consequences. Medical researchers estimate that between 10 to 20% of people over 65 live with this exact issue. That's millions of older Americans struggling with hidden drops in circulation each day. You might think a change as small as 20 points in systolic pressure can't do much, but that's enough to cut blood delivery to the brain to levels that cause dizziness or even fainting. And here's where it gets alarming. A large study out of the Journal of the American Heart Association confirmed that these dips aren't only linked to dizziness, they dramatically increase rates of frailty and falls. Participants with the largest pressure drops had more falls, weaker balance, and worse outcomes over time. It isn't just a passing spell, it's a predictor of poor health, and it often sets someone on a faster path to losing independence. Hospital statistics released in 2025 underline how significant this symptom has become. Emergency departments across the country report that more than 1 in 6 visits for falls in seniors were tied to low blood pressure episodes. That's not caused by clumsiness, not weak eyesight, and not simply tripping. It's a circulatory failure happening as older adults stand and walk. For caregivers and medical teams, the trend has become serious enough that hospitals are now required to document orthostatic blood pressure changes in frail patients. In other words, something as common as dizziness when standing is now recognized as a red flag for hospitalization risk. Picture this in a daily setting. Imagine a 68-year-old woman kneeling in her backyard, pulling a few weeds from her tomato patch. She stands quickly, feeling her legs wobble and vision blur, but she steadies herself on a shovel and walks toward the house. By the time she grabs the refrigerator door for balance, the feeling has passed. She shrugs, maybe thinks she skipped lunch, and reaches for a glass of water. To her, the moment is over. But what she doesn't realize is that this wasn't hydration at all. Her blood pressure collapsed faster than her arteries could recover. Each time it happens, her risk of falling, slamming into hard surfaces, or losing consciousness goes up. And millions of seniors experience this exact scenario every single week. Of course, everyone has felt lightheaded at least once or twice. How can you know if it's normal or a sign of something dangerous? The key is the pattern. A quick wave of dizziness that resolves rarely and doesn't repeat can happen to anyone. But dizziness that happens often, especially right after getting out of bed, bending over, or standing for longer stretches, carries much greater significance. That's when it signals orthostatic hypotension. It's not about being tired. It's not being weak. It's the circulation system failing to adjust when gravity makes blood race downward. And seniors are affected more often because their blood vessels have lost elasticity and their heart can't make instant adjustments. The bigger issue is that most older adults don't take dizziness seriously. They laugh it off, call it clumsiness, or say they need to slow down. Some even blame themselves for being careless. In truth, those episodes aren't personal shortcomings. They're medical events. And when ignored, they stack the odds toward the next emergency room trip. If someone continues to dismiss these symptoms as quirky reminders of aging, they miss the signal their body is sending. Oxygen isn't reaching where it needs to in time. A little humor highlights how easily these warning signs get lost. Imagine trying to describe the wobble to a friend and joking, "Well, I've invented a new dance move called the lean and wobble." It might get a laugh, but the truth underneath isn't funny. Each lean, each stumble is your brain struggling for supply. It's your cardiovascular system announcing it can't keep pace. And the health system treats it as no joke because repeated episodes correlate strongly with injury, hospitalization, and in some studies, long-term cognitive decline. That's right, leaving repeated dizzy spills unresolved doesn't only hurt your balance, it can eventually hurt your memory. So what's an older adult or a caregiver supposed to do? First, recognize that dizziness on standing is not something to brush under the rug. Regular home blood pressure checks provide one of the simplest tools. Checking once while seated and again within 1 minute of standing can reveal drops that otherwise go unrecognized. It doesn't take medical training. With modern home cuffs, seniors and family members can easily track results. If the systolic number drops more than 20 points, or if dizziness happens as the reading plummets, that's an important piece of information to bring to a doctor. These numbers can reveal patterns that a short office visit can't capture. Why does it matter so much to keep records this way? Because it turns invisible symptoms into visible data. Without it, a senior might only mention, "I get dizzy sometimes." But with actual measurements, a physician can see real evidence of fluctuation that can lead to medication adjustments, hydration recommendations, or referral to therapies designed to strengthen circulation. It takes a condition that too often remains hidden until a broken wrist or hip fracture occurs, and instead makes it manageable before disaster arrives. Dizziness, then, stands out as one of the clearest clues that pressure is dropping too low. It isn't random, and it isn't harmless. When it comes fast, it carries weight. Seniors can no longer think of it as a passing quirk. It's a warning. Today's false statistics prove the consequences of pretending otherwise. bringing it into conversation with caregivers, doctors, and loved ones is always worthwhile. And here's the natural connection to the next symptom. If blood supply falters enough to make you stumble physically, it can also make your mind stumble. The brain, more than any other organ, demands a dependable stream of oxygen and nutrients. When hypotension interrupts that flow, it doesn't only create wobbly legs, it clouds thought and memory. So if dizziness is alarming, wait until you see what happens when the brain itself shows signs of low circulation. That's the next silent signal seniors must watch closely. The constant fog, brain confusion, and memory lapses. What if the mental fog you keep brushing off isn't just a funny part of retirement, but a dangerous sign that your brain isn't getting enough fuel? People laugh about being forgetful, losing track of a thought, or mixing up details. But when it starts happening more often, those short lapses can be the brain's version of the body's emergency light. Low blood pressure doesn't just make you feel wobbly on your feet, it cuts down the delivery of oxygen to the brain. And unlike a sore muscle that recovers when blood flow comes back, brain tissue reacts in the moment. Oxygen loss, even for a minute or two, can create confusion, muddled speech, or lost attention. It may feel temporary, but each episode matters. The real question is whether you'll see it as just age or recognize it for what it is, a symptom with serious consequences. Think of how this plays out. Imagine sitting at a bridge table. The cards are on the table, the play is familiar, and you've done it thousands of times. But suddenly, in the middle of the game, you can't remember the rules. The others laugh. Maybe they tease you with a lighthearted senior moment joke, and within minutes you regain your place. That situation feels harmless in the moment, maybe even charming, but in medical terms, it's alarming. That lapse isn't random thoughtlessness. It's a brain struggling without enough oxygen because circulation dipped at the wrong time. To the group of friends at the table, it's simply entertaining. To a doctor, it could be a sign that the brain is being deprived and that another episode may be even worse. Hospitals are quietly seeing the truth of this trend. Emergency room clinicians report a steady rise in delirium cases linked directly to blood pressure that falls too low. Seniors arrive confused, unable to answer questions clearly, or disoriented about place and time. The episodes don't always last long, but they do match periods of dramatically reduced blood flow. These are not isolated cases. They represent a wider shift where brain fog and disorientation are no longer treated as vague or unimportant. They're documented patterns. And the link to hypotension is well known inside exam rooms, even if it's rarely discussed around kitchen tables. And unfortunately, seniors who experience them often don't even remember the details later, making it harder to realize what just happened. To understand why, it helps to think about brain function in practical terms. Nerve cells burn energy constantly. They don't store much for later. Without ongoing oxygen delivery, neurons can't fire the way they should. Circulation works like a wire supplying power. Cut it for a second, and the flow stutters. Cut it longer, and entire connections fail. When low pressure disrupts this supply, the brain acts confused. Short-term memory stumbles, focus breaks, and speech slows. Usually, circulation recovers within minutes, so the person feels back to normal. But during that gap, the brain got starved. Most people don't associate that momentary haze with their blood pressure, but that's exactly what's happening. Caregivers often notice this before seniors recognize it themselves. A spouse or adult child may point out that someone zones out during conversations or drifts silently for a few minutes before snapping back. Without context, families assume it's normal slowing, distraction, or fatigue. But medical teams know that these spells often correspond to low-pressure episodes. What makes it trickier is that many seniors hesitate to admit confusion, fearing it will be dismissed as early dementia. That fear leads to underreporting, which prevents doctors from getting the full picture. And yet, unlike degenerative conditions, many hypotension-driven lapses are reversible if treatment happens. The line between harmless forgetfulness and dangerous disorientation is often in the details. Humor highlights this easily. Forgetting where you set your glasses? That's a casual Tuesday. But forgetting your friend's name in the middle of a sentence, while also feeling weak or dizzy, may still be Tuesday, but that Tuesday includes hypotension as a suspect. Difference matters because the first is a nuisance everyone experiences, while the second combines neurological function with circulation failure. When these more complicated lapses get brushed off as friendly jokes, opportunities for prevention slip away. The consequences of ignoring mental fog can be harsh. Hospitals report that seniors who arrive with unexplained disorientation caused by blood pressure drops are more likely to stay longer, experience falls during admission, and require higher levels of follow-up care. The progression from confusion to medical emergency can be fast. What started with laughter at a card table can end days later with a senior unable to move around safely without assistance. And each missed episode means the body had to cope alone instead of receiving help on time. So how does someone take this seriously without panicking every time they misplace their keys? The answer is tracking the moments. A simple journal detailing when confusion or foggy thinking happens creates a practical record. Was it after standing quickly? Was it late in the day after a skipped meal? Was it ongoing for more than a few minutes? These details give physicians context that memory alone cannot, combined with blood pressure readings taken at consistent times. The journal becomes not just a diary, but a map. That map shows doctors patterns that suggest hypotension. And from there, they can adjust medications, hydration goals, or test for other underlying stressors. And this is where the difference lies between ordinary aging and hypotension warnings. Aging may gradually slow recall, but it doesn't create abrupt disorientation that clears minutes later. Hypotension does. Journal notes shared with doctors help bridge that misunderstanding. Without them, caregivers and patients remain in the dark, joking about lapses instead of treating them. With them, doctors can target causes before confusion evolves into a collapse or hospitalization. The mini payoff here is realizing that momentary confusion is not harmless at all. It is not just a quirky slip. It can predict much larger problems if ignored. Seniors who track their brain fog notice repeated episodes and communicate them give themselves a far better chance at avoiding preventable hospital stays. Nothing about these lapses should be shrugged off anymore. Your brain isn't asking for more Sudoku puzzles, it's asking for oxygen. And if your brain is showing clear signs that circulation is being interrupted, imagine what your eyes might be signaling during a blood pressure drop. Vision has its own fragile dependence on steady oxygen. And when that flow gets disrupted, eyesight often becomes the next warning system. Blurred or dim vision, even if brief, carries the same urgency as mental fog. That's the next silent alarm seniors often ignore, and it tells as much about low blood pressure as any dizzy spell or confused conversation. The curtain over your eyes, blurred or dim vision. Why would your vision suddenly dim or blur when your blood pressure drops? The eyes are one of the most sensitive organs when it comes to circulation. They depend on a constant stream of oxygen and nutrients delivered through tiny vessels at the back of the eye. When pressure isn't strong enough to push blood consistently, the supply falters and vision changes in real time. It doesn't take hours or days. It can happen in seconds. That sudden fuzziness or temporary darkness you notice isn't the sign of a dirty lens or a skipped eye exam. It can be your body signaling that circulation is failing to keep pace with demand. Seniors who dismiss these moments as nothing more than old eyes are ignoring one of the clearest warnings of hypotension. Ophthalmologists tracking senior patients are reporting this problem more than ever. In 2025, data from large eye clinics shows a meaningful rise in appointments where blurred or fluctuating vision is tied to drops in blood pressure rather than changes in the eye itself. This isn't theory, it's being documented in medical settings across the country. In fact, though cataracts and age-related degeneration remain common, specialists now emphasize that sudden, brief losses of clarity are often vascular, not visual. Yet outside of medical offices, the public rarely hears this. Seniors walk into eye stores, request stronger glasses, and leave thinking the problem is solved when in reality the cause has gone untouched. Imagine a moment in daily life. You're in the kitchen, reading the instructions on a food package. The text looks fine, and then, without warning, the letters blur into streaks. You blink, maybe rub your eyes, and before you finish that second thought, the words return to normal. This temporary change leaves most people relieved and moving on. But it was actually the result of blood not reaching the retina with enough pressure to maintain function. You may feel fine otherwise, so it seems like a fluke. But when circulation dips, even briefly, nerve cells in the eye react instantly. That's why the blur happens and then clears. It follows the rhythm of your own blood supply. It's very common for seniors to brush this off as normal. They've been told for years that blurry vision is part of aging, so they attribute every visual disturbance to cataracts, thinning retinas, or needing new prescriptions. And yes, there are structural changes in the eye over time. But what's different here is the timing. Cataracts build slowly. Retinal conditions often progress over months. Hypotension-related vision changes feel sudden, brief, and startling. Overlooking that difference causes many older adults to chase new glasses year after year, while the real problem, their blood pressure, never even comes into the discussion. There's a humorous way to look at it that still captures the seriousness. If you're sitting down to watch your favorite television detective, and suddenly the character melts into a fuzzy silhouette that may not be a failing antenna, chances are it's your own circulation taking a dip. The image isn't getting lost in the broadcast. It's getting lost in your eyes because the blood that carries oxygen arrived too weakly to keep the cells firing properly. It feels funny until you realize how often it coincides with fatigue, dizziness, or other body signals happening at the same time. Here's where the danger lies. Vision changes like these don't just inconvenience daily activities. They can directly lead to injuries. If one moment of blurred sight strikes while you're walking upstairs, driving, or pouring a pot of boiling water, it's not just an annoyance, it's a recipe for harm. Medical reports highlight cases where vision fade preceded fainting by less than a minute. Seniors who ignored what they thought was a visual quirk often ended up collapsing shortly afterward. That's why ophthalmologists and cardiologists stress the connection. Vision problems linked to low pressure are not harmless side effects, but early alerts. They warn of circulation so fragile that the brain and eyes are already reacting before full consciousness is lost. In one 2025 review of older patients treated for fainting spells, researchers found that over a third reported blurred or dim vision in the moments before collapse. It's not a coincidence. The optic nerve and brain are both extraordinarily sensitive to oxygen changes, and the eyes often react first because of their constant demand for clear focus. Understanding this connection gives seniors a chance at prevention. Instead of treating vision blur as something that passes, it can serve as a signal to slow down, sit safely, and check readings before standing or moving quickly. So, how should someone respond in those moments? Step 1 is recognition. Blurry vision that comes and goes within minutes is not simply age. Step 2 is monitoring. Rather than making an urgent appointment only with the optometrist, take a blood pressure reading while the episode occurs. If readings are low at the same time, record both in a log. That evidence is exactly what a primary care doctor needs to see. It tells the story that new glasses never will. When armed with actual numbers, professionals can confirm whether medication, diet, or hydration needs to change. Relying solely on eye exams risks missing the very system that controls vision in the first place, circulation. The mini payoff here is simple. Vision changes are circulation changes. They mean oxygen isn't keeping pace, and they don't arrive harmlessly. They can foreshadow fainting, falls, and emergencies. Seeing through that curtain of blur isn't about stronger lenses. It's about protecting independence and ensuring that the body's most sensitive organ isn't starved of supply. For seniors, acknowledging this difference could literally prevent the next fall or blackout. But the story doesn't stop with the eyes. Low pressure's reach extends throughout the body, and when it goes unchecked, its effects spread further than sudden blurry sight. One of the most common, yet quietest signs comes not through vision, but through energy. Many older adults complain of fatigue that never resolves, even with full nights of rest. And while they assume weariness is the natural companion of aging, it often traces back to the same culprit: blood pressure that's so low the muscles and organs never quite get what they need to power through the day. That constant tiredness is the next silent symptom seniors are ignoring, and it is far more serious than simple sleepiness. Fatigue that won't quit. What if the tiredness you've been writing off as normal for my age is really your body running on an empty tank? Fatigue is one of the most common complaints among older adults, yet it's also one of the most dismissed. Here's the truth. When blood pressure runs too low, it doesn't just make you dizzy or give you blurry vision. It starves your muscles, your heart, and your brain of the very oxygen and nutrients they need to function. That shortage creates a silent exhaustion that no extra nap or cup of coffee will ever fix. It's not ordinary aging. It's the physiology of low blood pressure unfolding every single day. Imagine this. A 71-year-old man wakes up after a full night's sleep. He didn't toss and turn. He didn't stay up late. Yet within an hour of being awake, he feels like he never slept at all. His arms feel heavy when he tries to make breakfast. His legs ache after the short walk to the mailbox. And by mid-morning, he's back in his recliner telling himself it's just part of getting older. This isn't laziness, and it's not a lack of motivation. What's really happening is that his circulation can't deliver enough force to keep his tissues supplied. Without steady pressure pushing blood through capillaries, cells burn through their energy stores too quickly and send feedback in the form of weakness, exhaustion, and slow recovery. The most up-to-date evaluations from 2025 show how widespread this problem has become. In senior patients flagged with chronic hypotension, over 40% reported fatigue, so extreme it interfered with daily activities. That means almost half of those living with low pressure are battling exhaustion on a level that stops them from cooking meals, keeping appointments, or even enjoying social time with family. This isn't subtle, yet it's still brushed off. Fatigue is often shrugged away with the phrase, "that's just aging," when in fact, the numbers confirm it is a defining symptom of circulatory failure in this group. And here lies the danger. Unlike dizziness, which arrives suddenly, or vision blur, which is hard to miss, fatigue sneaks in quietly. It builds gradually day to day until it feels normal. Seniors often forget what real energy used to feel like. They begin reorganizing their lives to fit the exhaustion, cutting back on errands, reducing time with friends, and eliminating activities that once brought joy. In reality, these adjustments are not a reflection of age alone. They're a direct consequence of blood not being pushed efficiently through the body. By the time the fatigue is deeply entrenched, most people no longer realize it's even a symptom at all. There's an important distinction here that can help people interpret what their bodies are telling them. Being tired after a workout makes sense. Muscles use more oxygen during exercise, and natural fatigue afterwards signals they've worked hard. that is healthy strain. Fatigue tied to hypotension feels very different. It lingers even after rest. It appears after minimal activity, sometimes after no activity at all. It persists despite a full night's sleep, and it doesn't improve with naps. When your blood pressure is too low, recovery never feels complete because your system still isn't delivering enough fuel. Rest tiredness is normal. Rest fatigue that refuses to leave is not. Humor can shed light on the seriousness while keeping perspective. One nap in the afternoon, perfectly fine. 2 naps, understandable. Nap number 4 before breakfast, that's when you need to stop congratulating yourself on being cozy and start checking your blood pressure. Persistent exhaustion is not just an amusing quirk. It's a warning, and treating it as normal delays needed care. The mini payoff here is straightforward. Unexplained chronic fatigue shouldn't be filed away under senior moments. It should be logged, monitored, and discussed. Pressure that's too low will always drain energy. And if that's the true cause, no amount of wishful thinking will restore vitality until it's managed directly. Recognizing the link allows older adults to break free from excuses and instead look for answers. A practical step for anyone worried about this connection is keeping 2 simple records. First, keep an energy diary. Write down how you feel throughout the day, especially in the morning after sleep, midday during simple tasks, and in the evening. Note the times when energy seems to vanish. Second, compare these notes with blood pressure logs taken at around the same times. When fatigue and low readings line up again and again, the evidence builds. That data is far more convincing to a physician than a vague sentence like, "I'm always tired." It provides the context that leads to treatment. And modern home blood pressure monitors, some linking with apps and caregiver dashboards, make pairing these logs straightforward in 2025. Ignoring fatigue tied to hypotension doesn't simply slow daily life. It carries heavier risks. When your organs spend months or years undersupplied, they adapt by functioning in a lower gear. That adaptation isn't sustainable. The heart works with less filling. The kidneys filter more slowly. The brain loses moments of focus more often. Eventually, this cascades into complications many people blame on separate issues. But the original driver may be the silent exhaustion caused by low circulation. By treating fatigue as harmless, seniors risk speeding the very organ decline they hope to avoid. Scenarios highlight how this plays out. A woman in her late 60s finds herself turning down lunch invitations with friends because she feels too drained. Her family assumes it's social withdrawal, maybe even early depression. But when checked, her blood pressure has been consistently under 90 systolic in the late morning, right when her fatigue feels worst. Another senior tries to explain his difficulty keeping up with his grandchildren's simple games. To him, it's proof he's getting older. To his physician, once logs are shared, it's proof his circulation is inadequate and his medications need a careful review. In both stories, the real villain is hidden in plain sight. What makes fatigue so insidious is that people begin tailoring their lives around it. Naps become the centerpiece of the day. Errands are skipped, walks are shortened, and with each adjustment, physical activity lowers, muscles weaken, balance deteriorates, and risk of falls increases. What begins as blood pressure being too low ends as a chain reaction that erodes independence. Recognizing fatigue as a medical symptom instead of a personality trait stops that chain before it gains momentum. That's the crucial lesson. Feeling drained all the time is not an unavoidable tax of aging. It is a modifiable signal of low blood pressure. By looking closely, tracking carefully, and pushing back against the instinct to excuse it, seniors can protect themselves from downstream complications. Energy diaries paired with pressure logs may sound simple, but they transform fatigue from a vague complaint into a measurable, treatable marker of health. And while energy loss shows how hypotension affects muscles and daily activity, other clues point directly at circulation failure in different systems. One of the clearest shows up in the body's temperature control. Seniors who notice hands and feet turning cold even in the heat of summer often dismiss it as thin skin or bad circulation from age. But in many cases, it traces back to the same mechanism of low blood pressure, making cold extremities another overlooked signal. That is the next red flag, and it expands the story of how widespread hypotension's reach truly is. Cold hands, cold feet, not just the weather. Does feeling cold even when the thermostat says 80 actually means something more than just thin skin or a drafty house? For seniors living with low blood pressure, that constant chill isn't about the weather at all. It's about circulation failing to deliver warmth where it should. When pressure runs too low, blood takes longer to reach the outer edges of the body. The extremities, hands, feet, and sometimes even the nose end up last in line. They pay the price with coldness that lingers long after the sweater or blanket goes on. This isn't speculation. It's physiology playing out. Every single day, blood pressure is the driving force that gets oxygen and nutrients to every cell, and without enough push, the farthest points get left behind. Consider how common this feels in real life. Picture a 73-year-old woman slipping heavy socks onto her feet before getting into bed. The calendar says it's July. The house is air-conditioned, yet her toes feel icy against the sheets. She chalks it up to getting older or thinning skin, convinced it's nothing serious. But what she doesn't realize is that those socks aren't fighting air temperature. They're covering symptoms of pressure that's too weak to reach her circulatory edges. For many seniors, this scenario repeats night after night, until the unusual becomes routine. What looks like comfort clothing is actually a disguise for hypotension's effects. Recent surveys confirm just how widespread this coldness is among older adults with known low blood pressure. In 2025, geriatric clinics published findings showing that nearly 1 in 5 seniors reporting consistently cold hands or feet also tested with blood pressure below recommended thresholds. That number is striking because it ties a common, often dismissed complaint directly to measurable circulation issues. Instead of just being uncomfortable, those icy fingers and toes represent a reliable clue that the heart and vessels are not effectively doing their job. Far from being trivial, they are symptoms that connect directly to organ health. Why does this happen so quickly? The body prioritizes vital organs. When circulation slows, the heart and brain take top billing, while extremities get whatever is left. With reduced pressure, less warm blood hits the small capillaries in fingers and toes. Without that flow, skin and tissue feel cold to the touch, even when the environment is perfectly warm. That means what people interpret as poor temperature control is in fact a reflection of oxygen and nutrient delivery failing to meet demand. It's evidence the delivery system is stretched too thin to maintain comfort at the periphery. Of course, this can create confusion with other health conditions. Many seniors are already told to watch for circulatory problems from diabetes, where vascular damage reduces blood flow and sensation. Cold feet in a diabetic patient may correctly point to peripheral neuropathy instead of low blood pressure. The overlap complicates interpretation. A senior walking into a clinic saying their feet are always chilled might be evaluated for diabetes. Yet in more cases than expected, the readings show hypotension as the real driver. Without proper measurement, assumptions can mislead treatment entirely. That mix-up underscores why symptoms should never be ignored or brushed off simply as normal aging. The humor tucked inside this is that spouses often get the blame. Many seniors joke at night, accusing their partner of hogging the blanket, only to realize the room is the same temperature for both of them. The problem isn't selfish blanket use. It's underperforming arteries. When the vessels can't push enough blood outward, no amount of quilt rearranging solves the chill. It isn't a bedroom dispute. It's a cardiovascular one. And recognizing that change in perspective guides how to deal with it. What feels like a household squabble about covers is telling an entirely different medical story beneath the sheets. So, why does this matter beyond comfort? Because cold hands and feet hint at broader organ undersupply. If extremities aren't being fed with steady circulation, what are the chances more critical tissues are receiving what they need? Skin can tolerate being cold. The kidneys cannot tolerate being undernourished for long stretches. The heart cannot continue to pump effectively without oxygen reaching its muscle fibers. What presents as a chilly finger can often accompany sluggish circulation across the entire body, a preview of stress happening elsewhere. Seniors ignoring that preview risk allowing cumulative deficits to erode physical strength, balance, and resilience when infection or exertion hits. The mini payoff here is clear. Coldness that shows up consistently, especially when friends or family in the same environment feel fine, is a sign seniors can't shrug off. It's not thin skin alone. It's not drafts sneaking through windows. It's the vascular system speaking up with a signal very easy to detect if someone pays attention. Brushing it off as trivial robs individuals of simple preventive recognition. Accepting it as a warning opens the door to earlier medical review and lifestyle adjustments. The practical step you can take at home is surprisingly simple. Touch your fingers throughout the day. Are both hands equally warm? Does one stay colder than the other? Does the chill return even after moving around or increasing activity? Repeat the same for feet. Checking morning, afternoon, and evening creates a picture across time. When coldness lines up with lower than usual blood pressure readings, a pattern emerges. Documenting this in a log and bringing it to appointments gives doctors a concrete connection. It can prove the symptom is more than discomfort. It's quantitative evidence of a circulation problem they can act on with medication changes, hydration plan, or dietary adjustments. One real-world example highlights the importance of this awareness. A 75-year-old man complained of cold feet in the middle of summer while his wife sat comfortably barefoot in the same room. For months, he thought nothing of it. Only after developing dizziness spells did he bring in records. Physicians noted repeated systolic readings under 90 during those weeks. The cold feet were the preview. The dizziness was the escalation. Without simple recognition, the early clue was wasted. His future treatment plan now includes closer monitoring, but awareness from the start could have prevented months of missed opportunities to stabilize his circulation. It's worth repeating, temperature perception is not cosmetic. It reflects oxygen and nutrient redirection at the blood vessel level. Seniors noticing entire seasons of constant cold extremities should not settle for just old age. While every household may laugh about sock habits, there's a medical reason behind them that deserves attention. The fix may be as simple as fluid adjustments or as complex as medication review, but uncovering the real cause always starts with admitting the symptom matters. That brings us to the natural next concern. If circulation struggles enough to leave hands and feet cold, what happens when an organ is vital as the heart is undersupplied? Unlike extremities, a hungry heart muscle doesn't just feel cold. It sends feedback as chest discomfort, shortness of breath, and even sudden pauses during activity. This next red flag shows how hypotension doesn't only inconvenience comfort. It can directly stress the cardiovascular system in ways seniors often mistake for natural limits of aging. Chest discomfort and shortness of breath. Why would low blood pressure, not high, end up placing so much stress on the heart? It sounds counterintuitive because people grow up hearing that it's only high pressure that strains the body. But the heart is a muscle, and like any muscle, it depends on a steady flow of oxygen and nutrients to keep working. When blood pressure drops too low, the heart chambers don't fill fully, the arteries don't push forward forcefully enough, and the very muscle tasked with powering circulation finds itself undersupplied. Over time, that lack of fuel is a direct stressor. The heart has to keep beating, but it ends up pumping with less oxygen than it needs. That mismatch, the demand for oxygen being higher than the supply, is what triggers chest tightness and breathlessness in many seniors. Think about a 76-year-old climbing the stairs in his two-story home. Halfway up, he feels his chest tighten, his breathing shortens, and he has to stop, gripping the railing until he recovers. Family members reassure him that it's normal aging, that everyone slows down. He even tells himself the same thing. But what's actually happening inside his body is that his blood pressure dropped low enough that the oxygen supply to his heart, muscle, and lungs could not keep pace with exertion. For those few moments, his heart didn't have the push to keep everything in balance, and it responded by creating discomfort and forcing him to stop. That pause wasn't just fatigue. It was a sign that his blood pressure drop left critical tissues hungry for circulation. The heart and lungs are inseparable partners. The lungs bring oxygen into the bloodstream, but without enough pressure, that oxygen cannot be transported where it's needed. As seniors exert themselves, their muscles demand more energy, their heart demands more fuel, and their lungs must keep up in tandem. Low blood pressure interrupts the entire chain, leaving both the heart and lungs exposed. This is why seniors describe not only chest pressure but also sudden shortness of breath while climbing stairs, carrying groceries, or even engaging in simple conversations if circulation is too weak. These activities highlight how dependent every part of the system is on steady pressure, not just elevated numbers. In 2025, cardiology studies began sounding louder warnings about the frequency of low blood pressure being linked to cardiac events in seniors. Hospitals are seeing rises in hypotension-associated incidents, from prolonged episodes of chest pressure to more alarming complications like fainting that occur during physical stress. While hypertension still dominates public awareness campaigns, clinicians emphasize that overlooking hypotension can be just as dangerous. In frail seniors, inadequate pressure repeatedly leaves the heart muscle underdelivered, creating small but cumulative injuries over time. By the time symptoms are recognized, the progression has usually been underway for months or years. One of the biggest dangers is confusion with angina, the well-known chest pain that comes when arteries are blocked or narrowed. Seniors often assume their chest tightness couldn't possibly relate to low blood pressure. They think chest pain belongs exclusively to clogged arteries or heart attack risks tied to high readings. As a result, they underreport the issue, or doctors chalk it up to musculoskeletal aches if blood pressure readings look deceptively normal or even good. That false reassurance delays intervention. In truth, angina-like symptoms don't always follow high-pressure pathways. Hypotension creates a different but equally urgent strain. Treating it as unrelated robs patients of support they absolutely need. Consider how many warning signals get brushed off. A 69-year-old woman sits on her porch listening to the radio, humming along to a song she's known for decades. She begins to sing more loudly, only to find herself breathless after a few verses. She laughs, thinking she's out of shape. She blames the song for being too demanding, but the reality is simpler. Her circulation is underpowered. That breathlessness has nothing to do with the music and everything to do with blood pressure. If you can't sing along to your oldies without gasping, it's not always the song, it could be your BP. Humor aside, the symptom reflects a cardiovascular shortfall seniors shouldn't laugh away. Cardiology teams underscore that persistent breathlessness paired with chest tightness is one of the clearest alarms tied to low pressure. Unlike fatigue, which can creep in gradually, or blurry vision, which may come and go. Chest discomfort during exertion signals a more direct burden. It means circulatory push isn't enough to sustain essential organs during stress. Ignoring it can have disastrous effects, from collapse during mild activity to the long-term erosion of heart muscle resiliency. And because seniors often try to normalize these difficulties with age, they delay seeking evaluation until the burden escalates into hospitalization. The mini payoff here is knowing you cannot treat chest pain or unexplained shortness of breath lightly, especially if these symptoms occur repeatedly and without clear cause. Even in the absence of blocked arteries or high cholesterol, hypotension can generate the same disabling warning signs. Report them immediately. Log the episodes, measure your pressure at the time, and bring both the symptoms and the readings to your physician. That creates a clear map of what is happening in real-life conditions. Instead of hoping a short office measurement will reveal the issue, without that map, decades of research show patients are missed and complications progress unchecked. Guidance from doctors is consistent on this. If chest discomfort comes during ordinary or mild activity, or if breathlessness occurs without heavy strain, schedule an evaluation without hesitation. If the pain is severe, associated with fainting, or accompanied by confusion, that's not a time for scheduling. It's a time for emergency care. Seniors cannot afford to gamble with these particular symptoms because circulation to the heart and lungs is fundamental to survival. Too many older adults wait, telling themselves they're simply aging, when in reality they're allowing repeated circulatory strain to go untreated. One senior explained that he felt like stair climbing gradually shrunk his life. Instead of going upstairs daily, he went every other day. Instead of carrying laundry up, he asked someone else to do it. He assumed this was smart adaptation. What he was really doing was silently adjusting to oxygen shortage. Day by day, his independence contracted until hypotension redefined his activities. This trajectory is common, but not inevitable if recognized early. The act of shortening stair climbs or slowing walking pace is not an adaptation to age alone. It's an unconscious adaptation to missing circulation. And the earlier you notice, the sooner intervention can protect independence instead of eroding it. So remember this. Chest discomfort isn't always angina from blocked arteries. Breathlessness isn't just getting out of shape. For seniors, they can be direct consequences of low blood pressure that strips the heart and lungs of the support they need. With current cardiology warnings and hospitalization trends confirming their importance, these symptoms stand among the top red flags no one can afford to overlook. If they appear consistently, they carry a message that can't be ignored. Seek evaluation, seek treatment, and understand that these simple physical sensations reflect major needs beneath the surface. And here's the important connection. If low pressure can leave the heart and lungs gasping, what happens to the digestive system when circulation slows down? Just like any other organ, the stomach and intestines rely on constant supply. When that flow weakens, nausea, queasiness, or even sudden loss of appetite appear. Many seniors overlook these as finicky eating habits or side effects of medication. In reality, they're another chapter in the same story of hypotension straining the body. That's the next hidden red flag. Most people never connect to blood pressure, but it deserves just as much attention. Digestive upsets, nausea and loss of appetite. Why would low blood pressure suddenly make food lose its appeal? It may sound strange, but digestion is one of the body's most energy-demanding processes. The stomach and intestines need a constant stream of blood to break down food, move nutrients into the bloodstream, and keep the process moving smoothly. When blood pressure is too weak to push circulation where it's needed, the gut falls short. Instead of efficient digestion, seniors may feel queasy, unsettled, or simply uninterested in eating. that can make mealtimes frustrating and eventually dangerous because food becomes not a source of strength but a trigger for nausea. This isn't about picky eating or bad seasoning. It's about circulation failing to keep the digestive system working the way it should. Think about a common scenario. A 72-year-old finishes breakfast and feels fine, but a few hours later, when it's time for lunch, her stomach turns. The thought of food makes her uncomfortable, and the plate sits untouched at the table. By evening, she still hasn't eaten much, believing it's just an off day. This seems harmless at first, but if the same pattern repeats throughout the week, fatigue worsens, strength fades, and the body enters a cycle where low appetite creates malnutrition, which then makes low blood pressure even more severe. It's not one skipped meal. It's dozens over time that leave the body weaker and more vulnerable. Medical data in 2025 paints a worrying picture. Hospitals are seeing a rise in older adults admitted for malnutrition, where chronic hypotension was also documented. In many of these cases, patients had lost their desire for food because eating triggered nausea or because they lived with a lingering lack of appetite. This association between undernutrition and low pressure has grown sharply, forcing doctors to rethink how often just a poor appetite is explained by circulatory weakness. Malnutrition itself then worsens the problem, reducing muscle mass, lowering immune defense, and making further drops in pressure more likely. It becomes a self-reinforcing loop that is difficult to break once advanced. The reason the gut struggles so noticeably is simple physiology. During digestion, blood flow to the intestines must increase sharply. The body diverts circulation, so the stomach lining and intestinal tissue receive enough oxygen to process food. If blood pressure is already low, this redirection becomes unstable. The digestive tract gets less blood than it requires, and the result can be discomfort, nausea, or sudden aversion to eating. Seniors describe it as unease in the stomach or a rolling wave of queasiness that arrives even after light meals. This discourages further eating, pushing nutrition lower, and guaranteeing that blood pressure has even fewer resources to stabilize. Of course, occasional nausea happens to everyone. Food reactions, mild infections, or stress all play roles. The difference with low blood pressure is recurrence. The queasiness appears without clear triggers, often connected to times when pressure dips the lowest, such as after standing, after activity, or simply late in the day. Unlike a one-time bad meal, these episodes repeat themselves across weeks. The appetite wanes, portions shrink, and seniors often cover the change by blaming food quality rather than recognizing circulation. Over time, family members may notice weight loss, but still miss the underlying reason. There is humor hidden in the misunderstanding. Many older adults half-jokingly blame their cooking for the aversion, saying the food just doesn't taste good anymore. The reality isn't in the recipe, it's in the arteries. The circulatory system, not the casserole, has changed. So when a favorite dish suddenly feels unappetizing, it's not the spices betraying you. It's your circulatory system underperforming in ways you can taste, or in this case, ways that keep you from tasting at all. This lighthearted outlook helps keep discussions open while underscoring that the body is trying to broadcast a message. The quiet danger of digestive symptoms is that few people connect them to blood pressure. Fatigue and dizziness might send someone to a blood cuff, but nausea usually doesn't. Because of that, one of the body's most reliable warning signs gets discounted. Meanwhile, the cycle worsens. Loss of appetite leads to skipped meals. Skipped meals lead to reduced energy and hydration. Reduced resources lead to lower blood pressure. Lower blood pressure leads to more nausea. Each step mounts pressure on the next, and suddenly the body is trapped in a spiral. Practical steps exist and can bring early stability. Hydration matters most. Low blood pressure often worsens with mild dehydration, which goes unnoticed in seniors who no longer feel thirsty as strongly. Regular water intake, throughout the day prevents circulation from collapsing after meals. Second, dividing meals into smaller portions eaten more often can help the digestive tract cope without demanding large redirections of blood flow. The smaller meals require less circulatory adjustment, decreasing the chances of nausea or faint stomach unease. Pairing this approach with nutrient-dense options prevents malnutrition while keeping pressure from dropping further. For example, a 78-year-old who struggled with nausea after big dinners reported improvement once she shifted to smaller meals and snacks spaced steadily across the day. Instead of one overwhelming event, her digestive system received a manageable amount of food, and her circulation handled the demands without failing. Simple strategies like these don't cure hypotension outright, but provide smoother daily functioning, reduce stomach upset, and help preserve appetite. They also give seniors confidence to eat without fear of discomfort, which in turn prevents the larger spiral of weakness and hospital visits. The mini payoff here is realizing these digestive issues are not isolated. They connect directly to the same circulatory weakness responsible for dizziness, blurred vision, and fatigue. Food refusal or nausea isn't a separate condition floating in the background. It ties to blood pressure directly. Left unnoticed, it accelerates frailty and narrows independence, all while being masked as something trivial. Seen for what it is, it becomes another early warning signal that prompts proactive care. Seniors who acknowledge consistent appetite loss don't just spare themselves queasy lunches. They reduce the odds of cascading health decline down the line. It's also important to separate general changes in taste or psychology from clear circulation-linked patterns. Almost all older adults experience a reduced sense of smell and taste over time. This can modify appetite naturally, but low-pressure symptoms often present more dramatically. A sudden wave of nausea when the pressure dips, a complete rejection of food after minimal intake, or consistent loss of appetite without explanation. If those align with documented low readings, the evidence points squarely at hypotension. Helping seniors and families recognize the difference is what prevents quiet starvation inside communities where symptoms are still laughed off. This brings us back to where all the silent signs of low pressure eventually converge. Fainting, digestive unease may seem modest in comparison, but in many seniors, waves of nausea or sudden skipped meals precede syncopal events. The digestive system, deprived of circulation, gives warnings through the stomach. Ignore them long enough, and the body escalates into collapse. That transition from queasiness to blackout is one of the most dramatic outcomes of low blood pressure. Yet, like so many other clues, it often goes unheeded until after the injury or hospital trip. And it is this next symptom, fainting or near fainting, that shows most clearly how low blood pressure is not just inconvenient for seniors, it can become immediately life-threatening. The blackout, brief fainting or near fainting. Why is fainting not just a simple spell, but a red alert signal of circulatory failure? When your blood pressure drops so low that the brain doesn't receive enough blood, the body makes an extreme decision. It shuts down consciousness to protect itself. Doctors call it syncope. To most people, it looks like passing out for a few seconds, but beneath the surface, it's the clearest sign that circulation has buckled. The arteries cannot push oxygen to the brain fast enough, so the system collapses into blackout. It might resolve in moments, but every one of those moments matters. Each fainting episode is your body saying it cannot maintain stability. It's not just a dizzy turn. It's not getting older. It's a broadcast warning. Picture this. A 74-year-old man tends to his garden on a warm morning. He waters his plants and bends down to adjust a pot. When he stands back up, the world tilts, a wave of weakness crashes through him, and he falls flat. He regains consciousness quickly, embarrassed, and blames the sun. He tells his family it was only the heat, but the truth is simple. His blood pressure dropped too quickly to maintain blood to his brain. What looks like a faint from sunshine is actually a sign that his circulation is unstable. Seniors repeat these stories constantly, assuming fainting is environmental, accidental, or trivial. Yet each episode adds another tally to emergency statistics, growing worse every year. Hospitals report that in 2025, admissions for syncope among older adults rose sharply compared to figures from only 5 years earlier. Medical centers in the U.S. show double-digit increases in fainting presentations among seniors over 70. These aren't random occurrences. Doctors link them directly to blood pressure drops associated with medications, dehydration, and decreased vascular elasticity common in older bodies. Emergency rooms now treat fainting not as isolated events, but as predictors of underlying instability. And the costs are heavy. A fainting episode often leads to falls, fractures, or head injuries. So a collapse doesn't just involve a brief blackout. It places seniors at risk of long-term disability. To understand the seriousness, it's important to know what's really happening during syncope. While awake, your brain consumes about 20% of the body's oxygen. That demand is almost constant. When blood fails to reach brain cells, cognitive functions start to shut off within seconds. You might feel lightheaded or tunnel vision just before blackout. Those fleeting warning sensations are the brain starving. If pressure doesn't rebound quickly, consciousness cuts off entirely. Think of it as an electrical system reboot. The body turns you off to keep vital functions alive, hoping a horizontal position restores blood to the brain. And while the strategy works short-term, it's life-threatening if episodes repeat or happen during dangerous moments. Consider how risky fainting becomes in everyday life. If a senior collapses while sitting quietly, bruises may be the worst outcome. But fainting can happen with no warning while driving, cooking, using stairs, or even holding a grandchild. At that point, the collapse risks not only their safety, but the safety of others. A faint behind the wheel can lead to devastation. Falling backward on stairs can create fatal injuries. Passing out near hot pans can cause burns. The difference between a faint that's brushed off and a faint that's recognized matters because circumstances multiply risk far beyond the blackout itself. Here's where plain humor highlights the reality. People sometimes laugh about fainting, comparing it to old movies where characters collapsed in a dramatic swoon. But modern hypotension is no Victorian stage act. This isn't fainting for attention. It's the body's version of shouting "Mayday" as loudly as possible. The loss of consciousness is not delicate. It is urgent. Treating it as theatrics is dangerous. Treating it as a message could save independence and even life. The mini payoff here is straightforward. Fainting demands immediate evaluation, no exceptions. A single blackout should never be filed under bad day. If it happens once, keep a detailed record of what was happening, whether standing, bending, eating, or exercising, and mark the time and duration. If it happens more than once, especially in close succession, an urgent medical consultation is required. If fainting comes with injury, confusion, chest pain, or prolonged unconsciousness, that is considered an emergency. Too many seniors hope the problem disappears. The reality is that fainting episodes are predictors of future crises unless addressed directly. Doctors consistently recommend tracking symptoms before and after fainting. Did it follow dizziness, blurred vision, fatigue, or nausea? Was it linked to a large meal position change or dehydration on a hot day? Recording these factors helps physicians decide whether the cause stems from medication, hydration, or chronic hypotension itself. Without accurate notes, fainting seems random. With details, the pattern becomes visible and treatment becomes targeted. Seniors writing logs shift fainting from mystery events into solvable cases. The numbers make it clear why fainting should be treated seriously. Emergency physicians cite sharp increases in ER visits where syncope was the primary reason. Seniors who experience one blackout are more likely to have repeats. And with each new collapse, the risks of hip fractures, head trauma, and permanent disability increase. Blackouts are not just wake-up calls. They are accelerators of decline. Every untreated episode leads further toward restricted mobility, assisted care, or worse. By recognizing them early, seniors and families give themselves a chance to intervene before accidents compound damage that cannot be undone. Real cases illustrate how costly ignoring fainting can become. A widower collapsed while using a ladder to reach the top shelf in his garage. He regained consciousness within seconds, but the fall fractured his wrist and injured his back, requiring surgery. He admitted later he had passed out twice before but never told a doctor, assuming it was nothing. Another patient fainted while cooking, striking the edge of a counter, and required stitches to her face. Only in the hospital was hypotension revealed as the underlying cause. Both believed it would never happen again. That belief left them vulnerable to repeat harm. Recognizing fainting as an emergency message also changes how people respond to less dramatic near faints. Many seniors feel the precursor sensations, sudden darkness around the edges of vision, wooziness, or overwhelming weakness, but manage to sit down before full loss of consciousness. These near episodes belong in the same category of urgency. They have the same cause, blood not reaching the brain. Dismissing them as lucky escapes means ignoring early alarms that will lead to total blackout in time. Physicians want to hear about them, and recording them with blood pressure readings adds the crucial evidence missing from too many clinical visits. The most important caution is this: do not wait until these blackouts multiply. Call your doctor promptly after the first event. If blunt falls, repeated collapses, or injuries occur, emergency care is appropriate. Pretending it's a one-time spell puts seniors at significant risk, not just of fainting again, but of suffering complications that erase independence permanently. Honesty with healthcare providers is not weakness. It is the strongest protection against accidents. So far, we've looked at the body's warning signs: dizziness, confusion, vision changes, fatigue, cold extremities, and now fainting. Each signal builds toward one conclusion: low blood pressure is not safer for seniors just because it looks good on paper. It silently erodes stability, independence, and health. The natural next step is to ask, what can be done to reduce these risks each day? The answer lies not only in noticing symptoms, but in partnering with doctors and monitoring at home. By tracking numbers, sharing details, and staying engaged, seniors regain control in the face of a condition too often ignored until crisis strikes. Partnering with your doctor and monitoring at home. Why do so many older adults stay silent about symptoms like fainting, fatigue, or blurred vision even when they're serious? The answer is often simple: they don't want to seem like complainers. Many seniors convince themselves the problems are minor, or they worry their doctor will dismiss them as part of aging. Others don't trust that small details matter. The irony is, doctors rely on those details more than anything else to understand what's happening in the body. By skipping over little issues, seniors leave physicians blind to emerging risks. A light dizzy spell may seem small to a patient, but paired with pressure readings, it can uncover a dangerous hypotensive trend. Without the information, decisions get made on incomplete evidence, and that's how preventable crises escalate. This is why consistent home monitoring has become the backbone of care for low blood pressure. A single office visit tells doctors only how blood pressure looks in that moment, maybe while seated in a quiet exam room. It doesn't reveal the dips that happen after standing, after meals, during exercise, or in the middle of the night. Only at-home tracking makes those realities visible. Validated blood pressure cuffs that fit properly on the upper arm remain the standard. Wrist and finger gadgets may be convenient, but studies continue to show that they report inconsistently. For older adults, using an accurate device matters more than speed or novelty. Fortunately, technology in 2025 has made this process easier. Many cuffs now include Bluetooth connections that sync directly to smartphones or tablets. Some even link to caregiver dashboards, allowing adult children to see readings in real time when their parents forget to report them. This isn't a luxury, it's a safety net. Falls and fainting spells often occur with no warning, yet caregivers reviewing real logs can see how pressures trended down across days or weeks. Those digital trails become life-saving communication tools, and in many cases they give peace of mind to families juggling long-distance care. Seniors don't have to carry notebooks anymore if typing is difficult. The device records, stores, and transmits automatically. Still, even the best devices won't help unless seniors know when to use them. The mistake many make is measuring only now and then, often at random times. That gives a scattered picture instead of a pattern. Doctors need consistent data. 3 simple rules can make all the difference. First, take a reading in the morning, preferably before breakfast or medication. These numbers show the baseline pressure as the body wakes. Second, measure again in the evening when fatigue or low hydration may have set in. Third, perform a check after activity, walking, gardening, or light exercise to see how exertion affects stability. Adding measurements while sitting, then again within a minute of standing, can expose drops invisible while at rest. Together, these snapshots create a picture that one 10-second clinic reading never could. One stumbling block is that many seniors underreport. They say, "I felt a little dizzy, but it wasn't serious," or "I just had a bad day." They don't want to waste the doctor's time. But hypotension thrives on underreporting. Those small clues stack up into patterns that drive diagnoses. By hiding them, seniors do both themselves and their physicians a disservice. Clinicians can only treat what they're told. Missed information often means misinterpreted stability. The patient leaves with reassurance, only to be rushed to the hospital weeks later with a preventable fall, blackout, or organ stress episode. Logs close that gap. Consider how one patient used simple tracking to change his entire treatment plan. He'd complained of fatigue for months, yet his in-office blood pressure never looked alarming. At his daughter's recommendation, he began logging morning and evening readings alongside energy notes. Within 2 weeks, patterns appeared. Every morning his numbers were stable, but by evening they dropped into dangerously low territory. Once shown to his physician, the evidence triggered a medication review. Dosages were adjusted, meals were reshaped, and hydration protocols added. His mystery fatigue improved within a month, and dizzy episodes vanished. Without the log, he might still be dismissed as an older adult slowing down. With it, the clues became impossible to ignore. It helps to think of symptom and pressure tracking as keeping a diary. Only this diary carries consequences if neglected. Forget to write about breakfast? No problem. Forget to write about dizziness and blood pressure? It may land you in the ER. Think of it this way. It's the one diary where forgetting to write can land you in the ER. That bit of humor underlines the seriousness. Consistent notation does more than provide data. It proves that symptoms aren't random or exaggerated. They follow a pattern, and patterns demand attention. The mini payoff here is realizing how powerful these small steps are. Taking routine readings, writing or logging them consistently, and presenting them to clinicians transforms the balance of power. Instead of being passive recipients of care, seniors become active participants. doctors gain sharper insights, caregivers stay informed, and symptoms that once felt mysterious become visible. The cycle of ignoring minor problems ends. The senior finally has tools to confirm, track, and address what the body has been trying to say all along. Of course, technology is only the gateway. The real transformation comes when communication flows. Many older adults hesitate to burden their doctor with minor complaints, but armed with consistent logs, those complaints carry weight. Instead of saying, "I sometimes feel tired," patients can demonstrate that fatigue occurs at the same time each day their blood pressure drops. Instead of vague remarks, they bring concrete records. That shift changes conversations with physicians from general to specific, from passive listening to active planning. Doctors adjust medications, tailor meals, or recommend physical activity with confidence, knowing they have real evidence to rely on. Even caregivers see benefits. An adult child checking Bluetooth-linked readings can notice sudden declines and intervene before accidents happen. Care teams working in nursing facilities can compare daily logs, identifying which patients need closer monitoring. The barrier between home and clinic shrinks, making health care more proactive. In a system where so many emergencies emerge because of long silences, constant tracking breaks the pattern. This step, partnering with doctors through consistent monitoring, becomes the turning point in protecting independence. Awareness of symptoms matters. Recognition of red flags matters. But pairing both with proactive action gives seniors true control. It's not surrendering to age. It's taking control of circulation before circulation takes control of you. It transforms hypotension from a silent threat into a manageable condition. So as we've seen, the body sends signals through dizziness, confusion, fatigue, vision changes, fainting, and many others. The solution is not to panic. It is to partner with your doctor, with your devices, with your caregivers, so no symptom hides in silence again. By combining awareness of these quiet red flags with prevention strategies, seniors move from guessing to protecting, from reacting to directing. And that bridge leads neatly into the closing thought of reassurance. Because while low blood pressure carries risks, recognizing it empowers you to keep living fully instead of shrinking life around fear. Control isn't lost to numbers. It's regained by listening carefully, recording wisely, and acting early. Low blood pressure is often praised as healthy, but for seniors, the quiet signs are not harmless. Dizziness, fatigue, vision changes, even fainting. These are body alarms, not quirks of aging. Ignoring them costs independence. Paying attention keeps it. The good news is that seniors can act before a crisis. Regular blood pressure checks, simple symptom logs, and open conversations with doctors change the outcome. Add a little humor, and even uncomfortable topics become easier to track. Monitor your numbers. Speak up about your symptoms. And most importantly, share this knowledge with someone you care about. It can save a life.